Okay, welcome everyone. Very excited to have all of you here, and even more excited to have Joyce back to talk to us about more genealogy. She's got fantastic ideas and she's going to share a lot today. We also want to remind you next Saturday, the 23rd, in person at the library, you can come in with some photos, not too overwhelming a number, to have them scanned, your old photos that aren't already digital, of course, have them scanned and we'll save them to a flash drive for you. And I'm very excited that we can offer that so that we can preserve all those old family photos. So without further ado, here is Joyce Sharrock, our village historian.
Good afternoon, everyone. And
Hi, Joyce.
History Month. It's my favorite time. So today we are going to, the presentation is going to be my surname.
Oh, whoops, Joyce.
Okay, I'm here. Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
In dealing with clients and other people, especially African Americans, when we talked about their bloodline and their surnames, we didn't inherit it necessarily. So they would be very, overly confident that the clicking they did on Ancestry.com was accurate. And I was the same way. I did not understand the nuances of Black history to understand how to actually research my history. So I said, I have these tools now and I have to pass it on. So that is why we got here. At the end, it's not just for Black people. These tools that I'm going to share can be used for everyone. I do at the end have some resources that for European history, surname research will be at the end. So I like to be very conversational. I have a different kind of workshop kind of outline that I do. I like to be conversational. So we are going to start now. Let me see, I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Let me just situate myself. So this is where we are starting. My maiden name, if you don't know, is Sharrock. And these are my assumptions. So when we all start our research, we have our assumptions. And this is when I was growing up. These were my assumptions about myself. I was definitely Irish because my name is Sharrock. Now, I never looked that up. I had no logic for this. It just sounded very much like Shamrock. I associated that with being Irish. And my mother is very fair skinned and so are her siblings. And they had red hair, freckles. My aunt has strawberry blonde hair and it's natural. And, freckles, my mother's very fair skinned with freckles. I have them, I'm just darker, you can't see them. So next time you see me in person, look really close to my face and you're gonna find them. But, looking at everyone in my family, it was plausible to me. And what I learned about slavery was that, all Black people were slaves. This is what I was, taught originally. So my last name had to be associated, obviously, with my last name. And that's why my mom was light skinned. So this made it all plausible. Didn't mean it was right, but that's what it was for me when I was younger. And that's what I actually attached to growing up until I actually became a genealogist and researched this for myself. So some things are going to be hard to hear, just like you see here that I put, someone in the Sharrock family raped my ancestor. That's what I was taught, that, there weren't consensual relationships in slavery because there couldn't be. So it was attached to me, a young child, as rape. So these are things that I have to reconcile. I had to reconcile when I was researching. So these were all my assumptions growing up. So then came the search. So you gather all the information. This is for everyone. You gather the information that you can find that's readily at your fingertips. Your main subject, which is usually yourself, you write down all your information, where you were born, the hospital. You're leaving breadcrumbs too, because someone's going to want to research you in 50, 100 years. Someone in your family is going to want to know what you were doing. So you leave those breadcrumbs too. So you write everything down about yourself, your spouse, your children, parents, grandparents, siblings, all the vital information, date of birth, date of death, marriage, the church you attended, all of that stuff really helps in your research endeavor. Locations, your job, that's going to be important. Not only is it important, it's inspiring. What you're doing now, you might think is just a labor of love, but it's important to your family. Jane, preserving the cemeteries, and Patty, preserving the cemeteries, that's important. And your family is going to look at that later and say, wow, that was my ancestor. It's going to inspire someone to keep going with that legacy. Military service, everybody loves the veterans. And we're very proud of the veterans that fought for our freedom in our families. So we want to have all that information down. Burial information. Cemeteries are a genealogist's dream. You can go find everything in the cemetery. That's a plug for tomorrow's jazz concert at Dale Cemetery. I'll let James tell you about that at the end. Then you have the church info, as I said, and then you want to talk to the elders. Find that oldest person in your family. Grab something to eat. You're going to be there for a while, but it's going to be the best time of your life. And you're going to just gain so much knowledge about your family. I love it. They always apologize to me about talking too much. I'm like, keep going. What else can you tell me? Because there is a jewel or 500 in that conversation. But as you can see here, I put down research packet. Now for me, my elder had a research packet of information that someone gave him about my family, and he never looked at it. So I said, I want to look at it. I want to know what's in there. So for African Americans that are on, we have an issue going back. So we gather our information, and then you start working your way back in time. But as an African American, getting past 1870 is a problem. That's called the brick wall for African Americans, because before that, if your family was enslaved, they were not captured by their name. But if they were free people of color, they would have been captured by name. And actually, is your indication of knowing if you were free or enslaved, is if you do see. So if you get to 1870 and that really is, 1860, and that really is your family, you've just hit the fact that you were a free person of color and not an enslaved person of color. So here is some details here. The census from 1790 to 1840, only names of the head of household were provided. This is for everyone. So 1790 to 1840, only the names of the head of household were provided, along with the number of slaves and free persons of color. I get a lot of people asking me, they're looking for the women, and they're like, I can't find my grandmother. It's like, you're not going to find your grandmother if she was married, because the head of the household was her husband. So we want to keep that in mind as well. And we eventually, like I said, you did see free people of color listed, but formerly enslaved Black people did not start showing until 1870. So this date is not important to you. This date is important to me in telling you this story. January 1st, 1829. So what you're looking at here is actually a receipt of sale of my family. And this is the day I became Joyce Sharrock. So I really want you to sit and digest what that really means to someone finding out their family lineage. Is I'm finding out the day I became Sharrock. So I can't inherit this name going all the way back, because I only became Sharrock on January 1st, 1829. And what you're reading here, I'm going to read it for you because I want you to actually hear what it sounds like from someone Black having to read it about their family. Is on January 1st, 1829, 3 siblings, Simon, Edith, and Esau, are sold by Thomas Early to Mary Sharrock for $550. And this is the receipt of their sale. So Edith is my great-great-grandmother, my great-great-great-grandmother. Thomas Early of Hopkins County and state of Kentucky, for and in consideration of the sum of $550 paid by Mary Sharrock of the county of Bertie and the state of North Carolina, the receipt whereof is hereby acknowledged, and himself therewith fully satisfied hath bargained and sold, delivered unto the said Mary Sharrock the 3 negroes, one boy by the name of Simon, about 11 years of age, and one girl by the name of Edith, about 7 of age, and one boy about 3 years of age by the name of Esau, is to have and to hold the said negroes, Simon the elder, Edith and Esau, to the fair Mary Sharrock and her heirs forever. As signed, sealed, and delivered in the presence of Whitmill T. Sharrock, state of North Carolina, Bertie County Court, February term 1829. This bill of sale from Thomas Early to Mary Sharrock was acknowledged in open court by the said Early and ordered to be registered. That is my interest. So when I'm researching, this is what I have to come back to, but it tells me so much, right? So I have great uncles in here that I get to research. I also find out that, remember, I took the name of this program is My Surname Is Not My Bloodline. I just gave you 2 surnames. My family lived by the name of Early. See, Thomas Early sold to Mary. So my family was Early before it was Sharrock. So now I have 2 bloodlines, and now I have 2 white families that I now have to research to find out more about this family. So you heard the ages of Simon, Edith, and Esau, but you never heard a parent going with them. So their parents were living under the name Early. They never were sold by Early. They were sold as children by themselves to Mary. And I want you to remember the names I mentioned here too, because you heard that it was in the presence of Whitmill. I just want you to keep that in mind as we go further. Okay. So this is actually the Sharrock plantation. Oh, it's doing things on its own. That's the Sharrock plantation. On the right is the Sharrock family that owned my family. And on the left is my family, along with some members of the Askew family from Ossining that were formerly enslaved on this plantation. And I want you to pay attention to the house. The house is still there. I've been there. I've researched, and I've actually did my research with the white descendants of the Sharrocks. We all went back to the house together. This is me on that same porch. I went back to revisit my beginning. And this time I can sit on the porch and relax. Unlike my ancestors, I was completely there to just sit on that porch and own it. And I'll tell you, I really sat there like I owned that property. I felt like we cultivated that land enough that I had the right. And the people that owned it were just lovely and very, very welcoming and compassionate about what I was trying to do. Ignore my outfit because I don't like it. I'm really mad, but I had to share this this picture with you. So what happened in that with me going there and seeing a will in that packet, it redefined the thought process for me and how I did my research. So I had to start to relearn American history. So the nuances of slave ownership, how they inherited slaves, because I only thought from the pictures that we saw on TV is that slaves were put on a block, they were sold off, and that was it. And I thought that we were only owned by the Sharrock family, all of slavery. That was the ignorance that I had because it was never taught any differently, and school does not go into the institution of slavery. So slave ownership, you can inherit a slave. I had wills where Mary died and left my family to her son, Whitmill. So we were transferred over to Whitmill at her death. And then some of my family went to her daughters, and that becomes very important later on as well. So if you are a slave and you have a family and now you're divided among the children in the will, if there are women, those women are going to marry. That was what they did. Then you had to marry and you had children, but the women did not keep their property. It went to the men. So whatever name they had, if the plantation owner or the slave owner was assigning the slave a name, they might just have given him their last name. They not always give the slave the dignity of a last name, but sometimes they did for possession purposes. So you were very clear about who they belonged to. So it depended from owner to owner. They were used as collateral. Loaning, you can loan your slave to someone to pay off a debt that you've incurred. How your slaves were transferred. Wills, we talked about that. Deed of sales, marriages. There's so many different things to go through. How slaves were recorded. You're going to want to look at wills, deeds, tax records, and my personal favorite, personal papers. You want to look at personal papers and collections. So if you're looking for the Smith family, or you're looking for the Sharrock family, in my case, in Bertie County, you're going to want to look everywhere and find anything about personal papers on collection at any repository. And that's where I found personal papers of Whitmill Sharrock. And he kept meticulous records, and he had a store in which that he let his slaves purchase a lot of things, and he named us by name. He left that gift. That was a gift to us. I have a lot of records that a lot of Black people won't have, because he was meticulous with his paperwork. Learning about slave life, how we lived, how we were not legally able to marry because a slave was property and not able to enter into contracts, but by permission of your plantation owner, you were able to be slave married. So he would allow a marriage to take place on the plantation. It was recognized from plantation to plantation, but it was not a legal union. And then Reconstruction is important to learn. If you're doing, you need to learn Reconstruction period as American history, but if you're really embarking on African-American research, you need to know about Reconstruction and what happens to the newly freed African-Americans who are now citizens that need to learn how to acclimate to life, which is legitimizing their marriages, working for wages. You're going to need to learn about all of that, because you need to know where to go look. So that brings to the point where I started researching into the Sharrock family. So like I said, the Freedmen's Bureau is very important. And then it goes into the claiming of a surname. So how were names chosen and adopted? It could have been the last name of the last person to own your family. So in my case, Sharrock was the last person to own my family, Whitmill, at emancipation. For some of them, not all of them, because remember, they had daughters in that family and we went off. We were in different places. So for most of them, Sharrock was the last one. It could have been the surname of a previous owner. So in my family, I also have that as well, where it was 2 owners back was the name that he kept, because he had it was some kind of attachment. I don't know what it is. I can't speak for why he kept that name, but for some reason he kept a name of 2 owners prior. I will say in my family that we have people that named their child Whitmill. Now remember, I told you Whitmill is the white man that owned us, and we have people in my family that named their kids Whitmill. Interchange names until one sticks. So I have that in my family. I actually show you a example of that, where they went by Sharrock, then they went by Watson in another document, then went back to Sharrock, and I think they eventually stuck with Watson. So the adoption of a new name first, because sometimes they didn't have a first name. You know, they had first names that were assigned by the plantation owner. And when you have left that kind of institution, you don't want any remembrance of it sometimes. So you completely changed your name, the first and the last name. And with the freeing, a lot of my ancestors, other African-Americans ancestors, just completely started all over, anew with a completely, totally different name. So like a created name like Freedmen, which was free man. And they just would be free men or freed man, was different variations after national leaders, presidents, occupation, occupational skill, carpenter, a place of residence, or a color. You have browns, blacks. So those were different. So it's very hard. And you see how the naming happened for us. We were able to choose it. So it's very hard when you're going back as a Black person is to determine if your surname is actually something that's been going on for years, or after emancipation, something that was chosen or thought up of because you just did not want to associate with what happened in slavery. So then that makes it very hard to go back now and to connect when you're going generations back. So this is my, I'm just gonna say grandmother. These are greats going back because there's too many greats for me to keep saying. But if you see here, it says Freeling Sharrock and Margaret Sharrock. So usually you would see people with two different last names. They were slaves on the same plantation, so they had the same name. So when you're doing European history, you might have Jane Doe, Jane Doe, and then you might have John, John Smith. They have two different surnames, but for Black people that were on the same plantation, you're going to have two people that had the same last name. Did not mean they were related. It meant that they were on the same plantation. And we also have, you want to think about it. Black people were not allowed to travel to go find a spouse. So you were kind of, if you weren't forced into your cohabitation partner, which that was breeding, you had to make kids, that was a thing. Or you had a small pool from very close to where you were to pick for a partner. So they weren't related. Freeland was actually purchased by Sharrock. He was a Henson before, and then came to Sharrock, then went to Watson, and then went back to Sharrock. So this is their cohabitation. So this meant after emancipation, slaves were able to legitimize their marriage. And they were called Cohabitation Records. This is the cohabitation record legitimizing their marriage. So it talks about how long they had been together, living as husband and wife, when they weren't able to be husband and wife. So it gives you an idea for the African American when you're researching how long that they had been a couple, because when they're telling this to the Freedmen's Bureau, they're able to put down, we've been together for 20 years, but now we're able to legitimize our marriage. So that is a clue for us as well. So this is the same family now in the 1870 census, and you see now they're using the last name Watson, same family, but they interchanged Watson and Sharrock until eventually they decided on Watson. And that's my family. So when I'm researching, I have to look for Sharrock and Watson and other variations of other different names in slavery, because I know where they were. And it's important for Black people, you have to learn this when you're doing it. That's why it's so difficult for us in searching. So I wanted to give you an example. In the 1930s, an
I think Joyce maybe had to go out and have to come back in. Yeah, give her a sec. You're there. Okay.
Okay, hold on one
Okay,
second.
good. Yeah. All right, good.
Can someone tell me the last thing that you heard?
1930.
Thank you. So this is a ex-slave talking about how he chose his name, the adoption of his name. So the master's name was usually adopted by a slave after he was set free. This was done more because it was the logical thing to do and not then the easiest way to be identified than it was through affection for the master. Also, the government seemed to be in an almighty hurry to have us get names. We had to register as someone so we could be citizens. Well, I got to thinking about all of us slaves that was going to take the name Fitzpatrick. I made up my mind I'd be fine. I'd find me a different one. One of my grandfathers in Africa was called JCO, and so I decided to be Jackson. So this is an example of how the thought process was in the name. So it's very hard for us. We really have to be super sleuths. You're going to be a super detective when you are Black trying to figure this out, and you're not always going to figure it out. So in my case, and this is me doing a very clean line of just Sharrock, because remember I have two sides, it's just a lot. So just Sharrock, I was a Boone originally, and that was in the 1700s. My family were Earlys for 90 years. We were owned by the Early family. And then we were Jenkins for 5 years. And then we were Sharrock until emancipation. But at the same time we were Sharrock, we were Outlaw, Watson, Gill, and Bazemore. And all of those names still exist, and my bloodline follows them all. And remember, this is just one side. This is one side of my family. So I use DNA. I'm not pushing DNA on anyone. That is a personal choice. It is a choice I made for myself to further my research. I recommend, if anyone's going to do anything, to research it for yourself, make an informed decision by really looking at the facts and not so much different people, but do the research on your own to see if it's something you want to do to further your research. But you all get a look at the inside of me. On the left is my genetic makeup. So this is who I am. But when I did Ancestry Dna, and what they give you is called the cousins list. And that cousins list was invaluable, because you know what I saw in there? I saw Boone, I saw Gill, I saw Bazemore. It was like angels were singing. It was like, hallelujah, let me talk to these people. Let's figure it out. And with some people, I was able to figure out some genealogical mysteries in my family and able to connect some dots. So it was very, very helpful. So in my DNA, a lot of people don't get to see the person that owned their family, but this is Whitnell Sharrock and his wife. They owned my family. I had to research him in depth because I needed to find my family. But what I did find out about him is that he was considered to be a more fair plantation owner for what it was. I'm not romanticizing slavery. It was awful. My family did not have free will. They were slaves. But for what it was, Whitnell was known in the community to be a more fair man. In fact, after emancipation, when we were sharecroppers, everyone around Bertie tried to go work for him because he was known for being fair. He was a pastor and a military man and revered in the community. But when I showed you the picture earlier, I showed you myself with the Sharrock family, and I told you we did our research. Not only did we do our research together, we did our DNA together. And I share no blood with the Sharrock family. I am a Sharrock by name. I don't share blood. And what is also ironic is Mr. Sharrock here only had girls. So his name lives on through his slaves. The descendants of his slaves carry his name. I'm his legacy. And that is the weirdest thing to say, is that my family carries his name on. His girls don't. So it's ironic when his however many great granddaughter was with me, and she looked over to me and she said, that's really weird. I said, what's weird? She said, you carry our name, but I never did. She said, neither did my mother, but you carry it. And she says, how do you feel about that? I was like, it is what it is, but it's an incredible story. So even though this man owned my family, he is a part of my story, and I carry his name. So as much as, we talk about slavery, it's over, it is over, but this does not leave. When Black people have to research this, they have to go back and reconcile. And this is just slavery is permanently a part of your life. This man is a part of what influenced the people that made me, living there. It influenced them. It made them part of who they were, how they were treated. I had family on other plantations. I mean, I've read in Freedmen's records how they were held captive. So Whitmill did not do that. But I share no blood. I just am his legacy, his name's legacy. But what I do share blood with is this man. This is my third great grandfather. He owned my family on the outlaw side, and I do share blood with him and his descendants. He is my third great grandfather. His brother was the Grand Wizard of the KKK. Yes. So that is what I have to, I could say it and smile because I've had a long time to digest it because it's kind of ironic and funny when you think about it. But that is my great grandfather. And how I found more about how my ancestors lived with him were personal papers. They left a lot of their writings, their papers around. In Whitmill's papers, his grandson, who became a famous painter, Francis Spite, he left a letter talking about the day that a young man was lynched, and he was trying to save him, and he was talking about the journey. He said when he got there, it was too late. They had already hung him and had castrated him. And that was my cousin. So this is the things that, you know, as Black people, when we're researching, there's a lot of pain. And not to say that there's not a lot of pain for other people, because a Jewish person going back that had to live through, they didn't live through it. If they were lucky enough to escape it, having to go back and research that is painful. So it is painful, but I share blood with this man. So he is a part of me and I'm a part of him, whether anybody likes it or not. That's what it is. So if your family immigrated here, so I say this and some people get very mad with me when I say it. We did not immigrate as African Americans. We were hostages. So I'm just going to be very clear. This was a hostage situation. It was not an immigration. We migrated when we were here after we were emancipated. We migrated around the country, but we were not immigrants. We were hostages. But if you're doing European or any other country, you're wanting to do research, I need you, oh my God, I implore you to go check a ship manifest. The ship manifest is beautiful because it has so much information, where the person came from, who they traveled with. And when you're looking at who they traveled with, look at the whole manifest, because you'll start to see communities transporting with each other because they're trying, you know, we're going to go together. We're going to go figure this out together. You're going to look at who's on the ship with them, which will probably recreate a community that they came from. It's going to tell you the community they came from. It's going to tell you where they're going and who they're going to be with. That is such a big clue. Study it. Just like a census document, you could study that for almost an hour and get a bunch of clues. You're going to get that off a ship manifest. So also, sometimes when the immigrants got here, their names changed. So as we're talking about surnames, when you got here, your name might have been something, but when you got here, you're like, you know what, they're never going to be able to pronounce this, or I don't want to face discrimination because of my name. I'm going to shorten it. I'm going to mix it around. I'm going to remix our name. It's going to sound very American. So that could have happened too. So you want to pay particular attention to naming patterns and how people handle their name, their surnames. Also, many Europeans commonly use their middle names rather than their first names on documents. So you want to pay attention to that. Learn the naming practices for your ethnic group. Google it. Do whatever you have to do, talk to your family, but you need to understand the naming practices. And because I started a little bit looking into the Jewish naming practice, it's fascinating. It is fascinating, but you have to really study it before you start so you understand it. That's why learning history is really important before you start researching. You really need to understand what happened previously. So learning naming patterns can help you identify family members. So for example, like if the first son was named after the father's father. So if you understand that, then you'll start to know, oh, that's him. That's the right name. This pattern is right. I think I'm on the right path. So we're going to myth bust a little bit. So the myth is immigration officials changed foreign surnames when they came to Ellis Island.
This is for me to do the genealogy, and I'm getting, you're supposed to get a tornado.
Hello?
Oh,
Okay. So the names of all immigrants beginning in about 1820 were documented on ship manifests that were completed in their country of origin by individuals who were familiar with the language. Immigration officials in places like Ellis Island were fluent in foreign languages and had no need to change the name. Many name changes came after our immigrant ancestors settled in America. So it might have been a year after, 2 years after, but they might have changed it. You know, a lot of things were going on. You know, everybody had their fair share of discrimination, I will say. So things happened and names got changed for many reasons. And sometimes saucier reasons like criminal activity, and we didn't want to be associated with somebody. We're changing that name, we're remixing. So there were many different reasons. And also in census documents, but that census is different. You actually did, especially like in North Carolina, where you had people that were not so literate being census takers, and they were writing down what they heard phonetically. So immigration resource is here for you all if you're researching your ancestors. And the ship manifest, the family search research wiki is amazing. Go in there and put in Jewish naming practices, put in, you know, Scandinavian naming practices. You're going to read some really good information. That's the family search, the search wiki. So I'm going to leave that up. I think this might be my last slide. Anyway. So while I'm letting you all write that down, does anyone have any questions for me?
Hey Joyce, it's Desiree.
Hi, Desiree.
So my question for you is, first, I love the picture of you on the porch. I recognize the symbolism in that. But like, what were your feelings, if you don't mind sharing a little bit, sitting there seeing that land?
So I want everybody to know Desiree is also a certified genealogical researcher. She's one of the, I call the foot soldiers. So she's really into it as well. So thank you for coming, Desiree. So what I felt when I went down to North Carolina was only for the purposes of research in my genealogy. I thought I was fine until I got to the land. And the people were amazing. And literally what they said, it was me standing on the left and the white Sharrock, and I'm just saying that for identification purposes so you understand what I was going through. She's standing next to me and they look at me and they said, what do you want to do first? What do you want to look at first, Joyce? And I just looked around and I started wailing. I was crying uncontrollably. I could not. So to answer that, Desiree, I felt surrounded by my ancestors. I felt connected to home. I felt complete. I felt enraged. I felt comforted. I felt happy. I felt sad. I was an emotional wreck, but I felt more complete than I did anything else. It was really figuring out something I thought I would never figure out. So the smile I had on that porch was like, I was able to come back and find you all at my own will. So literally, I am your dream. I walk around freely. I can come here. I dug up that dirt and I left. And I was able to do that on my own.
Thanks for sharing that, Joyce.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Bob Margolis. I actually did a presentation about a year ago via Zoom about my genealogical research, and this was wonderful and so different than mine. My background for Ancestry DNA is 100% Eastern European Jewish, which includes a family. I think it's, if I've got the greats correctly, a double great grandfather who came from Bavaria to Wilmington, North Carolina in the 1850s. And then while much of the family made it north to Philadelphia, some of the family was there. And actually in this family, they're brothers that served on opposite sides of the Civil War. I'm confident they didn't fight against each other, but that's another story. Is there any way to find out a bit more? So back to Wilmington, North Carolina, because obviously your expertise is in the South, more about, they were in the tobacco business. My guess is without being able to, prove this, is that I would expect, being a businessman in that business in Wilmington in the 1850s, they must have had slaves. Any way to find that out? Maybe the Wilmington, North Carolina Historical Society or something like that?
Yeah, I would go to the historical societies. I would Google to see, I would go to North Carolina State Archives. They are amazing.
Okay.
And they have personal papers for people all over the state. North Carolina is my favorite. They were fantastic at keeping records. I mean, we did have burn sections, but I would start there. I've been down there in those personal collections and they're fantastic.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I also just want to add, and I'm glad you brought that up, Bob. When I went down to North Carolina, they're very, very open about what happened, because it happened. And I found that the descendants of the slave owners are very willing to help you if you were enslaved, figure it out. And I did a presentation down there, and this man came up to me and he said, "Can you take my information? I found all of this stuff about slaves that my family owned, and I want to get it to that family." Like, I couldn't believe it. I was taught that the South was evil when I was younger, and I would be murdered if I go down there. You know how, things, you get taught things that are not right, not true. But I found that a lot of the families are willing to, a lot, not all, but are willing to help you do the research.
Yeah, and just to compliment you on your sources, I've got great things from family that came, the Jewish immigration that took place in the latter half of the 19th century. Ellis, the ship records are so wonderful in terms of connecting one relative to another, where you have somebody that came on a ship and they were met at the docks by another relative. And that's when you're looking at these things, just like looking at this census, that's one of those aha moments. Oh my goodness, these people are related and I didn't know they were related. It's
That's right.
So wonderful. Yeah, excellent presentation.
Thank you. I had a skeptic coworker that said, "Oh, I don't care about that stuff." I said, "What's your grandfather's name?" Right? I sucked him in. "What's your grandfather's name?" So while he gave me his grandfather's name, I'm looking it up. And I said, "Is this him?" And I show him the ship manifest. Number one, he started crying. 2, he said, "Oh my God, that's my grandfather." And 3, he said, "Could you print this out and make it bigger so I could take it home?" So I looked at him, I said, "I thought you didn't care." I thought you didn't care. And it's because people, it's intimidating. This work is intimidating when you're new, but I promise you, it is worth it. Everyone wants to feel connected. Everyone wants to learn about themselves. And how wonderful if we all can figure out who we are. Imagine the just the self-love, the inspiration, and the feeling of connectedness to our family, to history. I feel very connected to American history. I understand it better now, and I see where my family fits in the context of it. So it really does a lot for you as an individual doing this research.
Joyce, to your point about the descendants of the plantation owners wanting to help, if anyone is on Facebook, there are a lot of groups of these descendants who are looking for the slaves that, the descendants of the slaves that their family owned, because they want to provide any information, any documentation they may have, if there's any like heritage sites, or if they still own property where the family lived, they invite them to come and look. I am an active member of that group, but it's just amazing to know that these people are reaching out to kind of help further the story and fill in the blanks. So I would encourage anyone who's interested to just go into Facebook, look up some groups, and just see what you come up with.
Yep. Thank you, Desiree. You could just simply put in slaves and you'll see these names just start to pop up. descendants of the Sharrocks, descendants of the Bazemores, and you can get in these groups. You can go by location as well. I'm in Bertie County, and all day people just going in there with questions. They're offering information. It's information sharing. It's fantastic. Thank you, Desiree.
Hi, good afternoon. I actually had a comment and a question. I found your presentation very fascinating, and you're right. There are sometimes folks in the family that have a lot of information that might be kind of hidden that you have to reach out to. In our case, it was my second cousin on my mother's side, and he had all these pictures, and he said, I found all these pictures when my mom died, I'll send them to you. And I'm like, okay, but he didn't like label them on who the people were, so it was kind of hard. But then I got in touch with my mother's brother, and he's like, you send me the pictures, I'll tell you who they are. I'm like, okay. So then we actually found a picture of their grandfather, which we hadn't, I didn't even know who the man was, but it was a picture of my grandfather, but my great grandfather. So that's, you're right. There are always hidden gems out there somewhere.
How did it feel for you when you found that, when you realized who he was? Did that change you? That changes me when you identify them.
Yes, because at first it was a very nice dressed people. And then you weren't really certain how you were connected to them, It was kind of sad. And then, my other second cousin, we found out we had an early picture of her mom, and her mom had passed away like really early in her life. So she's like, can I have the picture? Because that's my mom. And I was like, yeah, okay. I didn't recognize her either because she had passed away when I was a real young child. But my question was, as you were also researching your family, you were able to see who had purchased your family. But beyond that, could you go back further than that to find out where they actually came from versus just the family who had purchased them?
So the enslaved ancestor, right? Is that
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I'm back to the 1700s. I haven't hit Africa yet, but I know I'm close. I'm either close to Africa or close to the Caribbean, the first stop. But it gets hard there. I know some people that have actually busted through that brick wall, but I have not yet.
Yeah, my sister actually had started our genealogy and picked one of our grandparents that had a less common name, because on one side of the family it's Williams. So, there's a ton of Williams out there, and it was a little harder. She had taken a genealogy class in college. And so she picked the least common name out of the four grandparents. And, of course, we only got so far as well. So it was helpful to understand about why on certain dates, after certain dates, you may not find any records. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
Joyce, this is Karen. Can you hear me?
Okay. So this research is amazing. There's so much. I'm sorry, who's talking?
It's me, Jane.
Jane.
To compliment you again.
Thank you.
It's a terrific presentation. So much. I just want to turn you off and start doing this. So
Yes. And you're never going to sleep again, by the way.
I know it can be a rabbit hole,
Yeah.
You look up and it's 4 o'clock in the morning, but
Absolutely. It could get expensive. Family Search is free. It's harder to navigate, and Desiree can attest to that. It's harder to navigate, but worth it. They have a lot of stuff. But find historical societies, genealogical societies around you. We have Little Bertie in the Austin Public Library. And people with like minds and like interest figuring it out. I'm still learning every day how to find things, new research techniques, new resources, new documents, repositories. You never stop learning. And if you think you've gotten to the end of your research and you found everything, you didn't. There's always something else. And everything's a story. Don't get discouraged if you just found an article. That's an article about your family. That's part of your story. If you found your grandparents' wedding announcement and you found out that your grandmother had on a beautiful chiffon dress and they were dressed to the nines in their yard, that's your story. It's a beautiful story. That's the story you share with your family. So don't be ashamed if you found a little and someone else found a lot. You found a little bit about yourself. It's your story.
Joyce, I just have 2 comments
Yes.
and then I'll stop talking, guys. One, I would say too, to the point of the story of the, people, let me back up. African-American people, our dream is to jump the water and make it back to Africa. And I think many of us get frustrated that we can't just make the beeline there. And I appreciate you saying, or the Caribbean, because we do know a lot of people went to the Caribbean or even to Brazil and South America before they ever made it here.
Yep.
But there's another part of American history that says that we were here in the 1500s. African people were brought over here through different means other than slavery. And some of us may descend from those families. So it's never, it's not a cookie cutter story. We don't all have the same one. You'd be surprised what you may find and who you may be related to. And then the second thing I wanted to say is just a plug for those of us who actually do this work kind of professionally. There are people out here who will help if you need help. Not the same, financial motivations as maybe other things, right? Some of us may do it for free because we want to sharpen our research skills. We might be part of a group that just does this kind of work, pro bono. But look for some of us because we're out here. I, for one, am always willing to help out. And I know that, there are others. So try to find us if you need any help, because we definitely, we share the joy that you share upon these discoveries. It's the weirdest thing. Like, I'd be happy for you if you won $1 million, but secretly I'd be jealous. But when I find your ancestor, I'm going to party with you like it's mine. And there's no underlying anything else other than that joy, So that's all.
Desiree, put your information in the chat for people to see. But yeah, it is the weirdest phenomenon. I have literally gotten up and ran around in a circle, been so excited for someone. They're looking at me like I'm crazy. Like, are we related? I'm like, no, but we just found it. It's amazing. Aren't you excited? So we share in it. It's a lot. And I do have one thing to say about occupations. First, speaking to other African Americans, when you have to say that your family was enslaved, I want you to be proud of that. Let me tell you why. They made it because you're here. And in slavery, they were skilled workers. They knew how to build houses. They cultivated the land. They cultivated crops that they didn't know how to do in the United States. But when they brought your enslaved Africans, they were able to do it, like rice. They were midwives. You have to go to school for that now. But our ancestors were delivering babies, feeding them for their plantation owners. There's nothing for you to be ashamed about. Be proud of all of it. Own it, because you're here. They were wonderful, talented, and smart people. They did not speak the language of the person that intimidated them every day, that took them from their land. So dealing with that stress, they were able to do all of that. Nothing to be ashamed of. And for anyone else, when you're looking at your ancestors' occupation and you don't think that it's glamorous, it was, because they helped build the country, or they helped invent something, or they just merely fed your family. And that's something to be proud of. So we need to just, we cannot put our head down about things that everyone's not going to be a doctor and a lawyer. We need to look at what our family did and see the beauty in all of it. I even claim my criminals because someone did something to them and made them criminals. So, but anyway, but I embrace it all because it's part of my story.
It's true.
Anything else?
Hello? May I
Yes.
ask a question?
Sure.
I missed like the beginning of it, but I know it's recorded, so I'll watch it again. But the question is, I have Ancestry.com, right? And you have to pay for the membership every 6 months. And I stopped the membership. But the problem is, they'll send me emails and it says, oh, we have a hint. But then what they do is they snooker you. You go into the hint. They say, well, you got to pay in order to see it. Is there a way that I could get around that?
No.
So you
Family
mean
search.
what?
Family search, the family search website is free, and they have the same records. if you just note the collection that you found the hint, it will tell you if it's a census. Go ahead, Joyce.
Okay.
They don't always tell you when they're doing that, when you've stopped your membership, they don't give you that much, Desiree.
They don't give it to you anymore?
They don't give you that
That's
much.
what I hate about
Yeah,
them.
they don't do it. So you have to, Family Search is free, but I'm going to let you know, it's harder to navigate. Give yourself time. Go onto YouTube, do a Family Search tutorial. If it's 30 minutes, do it, take it in bite sizes. This can be intimidating work because it takes a lot. But like Desiree said, the same information on Ancestry is on Family Search. Sometimes it's just a little harder to navigate. It's not as user-friendly as Ancestry, but it's just loaded with information.
The other problem is that I like hit a wall. So I'm third generation Italian on my father's side,
Mhm,
first generation Colombian on my mom's side.
mhm.
So my father's side, it really hits the wall where my great grandfather came in.
Okay.
And I don't know now to go back to Italy, I can't find that line. I can't make that connection. The only thing that's the only thing. I know he became a citizen in 1900.
Mhm.
And unless I go to NewYorkCity.com to get a certificate of his death certificate, but I don't think it's going to help me that much because I was able to see a census and it just says Italy. It
I want
doesn't.
You have a pen? You have a
Yeah,
pen?
I got one.
Okay, I want you to go to this website. It's LA
LA
GA
GA
ZZ
ZZ
ETT
ETT
AIT
AIT
ALI
ALI
ANA .com.
Okay, La Gazette,
Italiana.
La Gazzetta Italiana, Italian.com.
Italiana.com.
Okay,
Wonderful resource for helping you get through brick walls for Italians.
okay, but it's gonna be in English?
Yes.
Okay, and then the other one, how about for like Colombians? You have that? Because I hit into a brick wall with my mom.
Go to Family Search. Go to the Family Search Wiki, WIKI.
Family Search Wiki,
Yep. And you're going to look up, you said Colombia, right?
yeah.
Look up Colombia and it will give you all kinds of directions that you can go in different resources and tell you what's there on their site as well. And it's free.
Now, isn't that like possible that like back in the day, there was no written record and then that could be a problem? Like
There's
say-
always that possibility for everybody that there's not a written record or it was destroyed. Or, you know, with Italians, I was just reading that as well. There was a lot of name changing because they were afraid when they got here, people couldn't pronounce it. So they changed it.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, my name, I know for a fact, my name is Panico and that stayed the same. But
Okay.
on my mother's side, I mean, they were really, really poor. And I don't even know if back in like 200 years ago, if they were even doing records. I know they had the birth certificate in a church, but you know, where they were baptized, but that would be about it.
Right. When you go into that wiki, you're
Yeah.
going to learn about, it tells you about the region as well. So you'll learn when the documents started, when they started documenting certain things. You're going to learn that in the wiki. It gives you a very detailed explanation of the region.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's the question.
You're welcome.
Alrighty.
Anything else?
Any more questions from anyone for Joyce?
I don't have a question, but I would like to add a comment. This is Jean Sutherland.
Hi, Jean.
Hi, I am past president of the Westchester County Genealogical Society and have been doing family research for 45, 50 years, believe it or not. It was very difficult when I started because it was hard to find material. It is so much easier now. And if you're doing research, you're very lucky to be doing it now because there are so many sources. I have used Ancestry a lot. And just recently, within the last 3 or 4 months, through information submitted on Ancestry, I have taken one line back to New York City to 1659. Now, I'm a typical American in the sense that one ancestor on my father was new to this country and one ancestor on my mother had only been here a little time, but they both married into families that had been into the United States and in New York for decades. But, and I found, like I said, if it wasn't for these Bible records, and you're not going to find them everywhere, but I found 2 Bible records on Ancestry within 3 months that added to the 2 existing Bible records that I had, one that I had inherited and one that had been given to me by a distant relative. And within those 4 Bible records, which were sequential, I managed to go back to 1659. But I love all my ancestors, even the one that came in, in what, 1890. I think that was the oldest one in this country, or the youngest into this country. So don't give up. It's there. It could take you decades, but the information can be found.
Yes. Also, Bob brought up a good point. I didn't share it the screen. Cindy's list is good too.
Yeah.
So CYNDISLIST.com.
And can I just point out, all of these resources are or will be on the library website. We have a genealogy section. We also have videos of Joyce's previous talk that you can listen to. That's on our LibGuides. If you go to the digital library for all of this, you'll see all those resources, Joyce's video and everything.
Thank you. Yeah, I keep adding to that as well. There's a lot of resources. I mean, you need newspapers from different places, and Steve Morse, like you said, Bob. I think I put that on my last list. But is a lot. And if you are from this area, reach out to Jean. Jean, can you tell them what the Facebook name is so they can find you guys there as well?
The Westchester County Genealogical Society. And because of the pandemic, it's only been meeting, what's the word that I'm thinking? They haven't been meeting in person. They used to meet once a month, like I think about 8 or 9 months of the year. They didn't meet and it's been going on for years, the organization. It is shrinking a little bit because so many people now don't need these resources of a genealogical society because they find it online. But going way back, that's how you found information, is by going to these meetings and hearing what other people were telling them about where they found their information. I was a member of the New York Genealogical Society in New York City for years, and I used to go down like once a month just to research. They no longer have a active physical organization, but they certainly online, they have been adding stuff constantly. But there are so many places. I can remember when I worked in Manhattan, I would say once or twice a week after work, I would go to the New York City Public Library, which has a phenomenal collection of records. I mean, the resources, there are so many resources, you'll never live to visit them all.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Jean. And
You're
finally, Shandi, if you can just announce the Little Bird Tea. Shandi, are you still there?
Yeah, she is.
Okay. Well, maybe she can't get the Little Bit. Diana, are you mute? Can you hear me? Everyone? Okay, Diana, you're
Debbie
muted.
will be with you to do the scanning.
Yes, I just wanted you to announce to the group when we meet and what Little Bird Tea is.
Sure. 4 of us got together who were from, our families are from Bertie County, realized that there was a connection to the migration of the majority of families that came from that county in North Carolina, specifically to Ossining. And so we help other people do research. We put on presentations And as I was saying, we're going to be helping folks scan photos.
Yes, thank you, Shandi.
Mm-hmm.
And there is also the Schomburg. Schomburg just helped me figure out a research mystery the other day. Desiree just put that in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a lot to go over, but I know we're over time now. You could, like I said, Jane said it also, it'll be 4 o'clock in the morning. We literally can be here and it'll be 4 o'clock in the morning and you all will be mad at me. Diana.
Yeah, listen, I want to thank you, Joyce. That was amazing to hear your own personal story, but also expanding it to how we can all do our own research. I mean, that was amazing, Joyce. And I really appreciate it. We all do, I'm sure. I'd like to send everyone a very quick survey link afterwards so that you could tell us what you thought of the program, because we'd love to hear from you. And I'm sure we'll be doing more with Joyce because she's quite popular and so knowledgeable. So again, thank you, Joyce, and thank you everyone for coming. And we'll have the video up in case you missed it or part of it soon. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Joyce.
Welcome.